You ever notice how we walk around like we owe everybody a piece of ourselves? Like it's our job to carry everyone's opinions, everyone's expectations, like backpacks full of bricks, and then wonder why we're exhausted. You keep calling it kindness, but deep down you know it's not kindness, it's fear. It's fear dressed up as compassion. It's the fear of being rejected, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being called too much if you ever dare to stand up and speak with your full voice. But God didn't call you to be everybody's doormat. He didn't design you to be soft so the world could shape you. He called you to be strong so He could shape the world through you. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop apologizing for being bold. Stop shrinking so someone else can feel tall. You weren't made to be soft for everyone. You were made to be solid where it matters. And today we're going to talk about what it looks like to stop bending and start becoming. Being kind doesn't mean being a pushover. That's a truth we all nod our heads to, but few of us actually live by. Somewhere along the way, we started confusing kindness with compliance, compassion with convenience, and love with letting people walk all over us. We started believing that in order to be good people, Christian people, moral people, decent people, we had to always say yes, always be available, always be agreeable, and never rock the boat. But that's not kindness. That's not strength. That's surrendering your power to keep people comfortable. That's not how God wired you, and that's definitely not how He called you to live. Kindness is a fruit of the Spirit, yes, but so is self-control. So is faithfulness. Kindness is not the absence of boundaries. In fact, real kindness can't exist without boundaries. If you give someone a gift with no intention, no purpose, and no limit, what you're offering isn't kindness. It's just passivity. And passivity will drain you, not fill you. When your kindness costs you your peace, your purpose, your identity, you're not practicing virtue, you're volunteering for emotional slavery. People will always want something from you. That's just reality. They'll want your time, your attention, your agreement, your energy, your presence. Some won't even ask directly. They'll expect it. They'll demand it in subtle ways. They'll use guilt, silence, praise, or even spiritual language to get it. And if you're soft to everyone, if you constantly give in just to keep the peace, you'll find yourself living in pieces, giving a little bit of yourself away in every interaction until there's nothing left of you, nothing but a tired, burned out shell who calls it love, but knows it's really fear wearing a friendly face. It's time to redefine what kindness really looks like. It looks like truth. It looks like respect, not just for others, but for yourself. It looks like discernment. It looks like choosing when to pour out and when to pull back. It looks like knowing that not every battle is yours to fight and not every person is your assignment. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is say no. Sometimes love looks like limits, and sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is let someone feel the weight of their own consequences instead of always cushioning the fall for them. Jesus was kind, but Jesus was never a pushover. He flipped tables. He called out hypocrisy. He confronted manipulation. He walked away from crowds. He disappointed people with purpose. And yet we think that to be Christ-like means being endlessly agreeable. We think if we're upsetting people, we must be doing something wrong. But sometimes upsetting people is the clearest sign you're finally doing something right. Because people who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always interpret your growth as betrayal. Let's get real. Being soft to everyone is just people-pleasing in disguise. It's not humility, it's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. And we wear that fear like it's a virtue. We call it keeping the peace. But what we're really doing is avoiding confrontation because we don't want to be uncomfortable. We're not protecting peace, we're protecting our image. And the problem with that is eventually that image becomes more important than your calling. You'll start editing your authenticity just to make sure everyone else is okay with you. God didn't put you on this planet to be liked by everybody. He put you here to be light. And light doesn't apologize for shining. Light doesn't dim itself so others can feel more comfortable in the dark. Kindness means being light even when it exposes things people don't want to see. Kindness means speaking truth, not just comfort. It means caring more about someone's freedom than their feelings. And sometimes being kind means stepping back so God can step in. You can love someone deeply and still say no to them. You can care about someone and still not carry their emotional baggage. You can pray for someone and still not let them manipulate you. That's not cold, that's courageous, that's not hard-hearted, that's healthy. You're not responsible for fixing everyone. You're not responsible for making everyone feel good. You are responsible for obeying God, for protecting your peace, and for walking in truth. And truth requires clarity. Truth requires courage. Truth requires a spine, not just a heart. If your kindness is always costing you your convictions, it's not kindness, it's compromise. And compromise might win you approval, but it will never win you freedom. You were not created to live in quiet resentment just because you're too afraid to say what you really mean. You weren't made to carry the emotional weight of everyone around you just because you're scared to be seen as selfish. You weren't called to keep the waters calm. You were called to walk on them. Think about the people you admire, the leaders, the mentors, the friends who inspire you. Are they soft with everyone? Or are they strong enough to disappoint the wrong people so they can bless the right ones? Are they always agreeable, or are they anchored in something deeper than approval? The people who change the world aren't the ones who cater to every voice. They're the ones who know which voice matters most, the voice of God. And God's voice will always call you to live in truth, not just niceness. We've got to stop teaching people that love means losing yourself, that goodness means erasing your voice, that holiness means letting everyone else write your story. That's not love, that's codependency. And codependency will keep you stuck in cycles where your worth is tied to how useful, helpful, or agreeable you are to everyone else. But real love, God's love, sets people free. And you can't set anyone free if you're still chained to their approval. So maybe it's time to look in the mirror and ask yourself, is your kindness really love? Or is it fear? Is it rooted in strength? Or is it rooted in a need to be accepted? Because if your kindness is making you smaller, quieter, weaker, then it's not bearing the fruit it was meant to. The Bible says you'll know a tree by its fruit. And if the fruit of your so-called kindness is bitterness, exhaustion, or resentment, then something's off. You're not serving people, you're silently suffering under them. And that's not what God had in mind. God doesn't want you drained, He wants you directed. He doesn't want you broken, trying to keep everyone else whole. He wants you bold enough to let Him be the fixer while you stay focused on being the follower. Following Him doesn't always look like pleasing people. In fact, most of the time, it looks like disappointing people so you can stay in alignment with purpose. And that's where true kindness lives. In the tension between grace and truth, compassion and clarity, presence and peace. You were not built to be soft to everyone. You were built to be solid in Him. And when you're solid in Him, you stop needing validation from them. That's when your kindness becomes power, not performance. That's when your love becomes a force, not a flaw. That's when your presence stops blending in and starts breaking chains, because it's no longer rooted in fear. It's rooted in freedom. Boundaries are not selfish, they're sacred. That's something we don't hear enough, especially in a world that constantly confuses availability with love and self-sacrifice with holiness. We've been conditioned to believe that being good means being endlessly accessible, always saying yes, never letting anyone down, and showing up even when we're barely holding it together ourselves. But there's nothing holy about running on empty. There's nothing righteous about setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And there's absolutely nothing godly about burning out in the name of love. Boundaries are not a rejection of others. They are a recognition of what God has entrusted to you. When God made you, he gave you a soul, a mind, a heart, a calling, your life. And he called you to steward that life with wisdom. You don't steward something by giving it away to anyone who asks. You protect it, you care for it, you nourish it, you build it up so it can bear fruit. And fruit doesn't grow in chaos, it grows in order. That's what boundaries bring. Order, clarity, protection, direction. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're fences to protect what's valuable. And you are valuable. People will try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're being distant, cold, selfish. But here's the truth. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always be uncomfortable when you start building them. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're finally doing something right. You're finally stepping out of the pattern of people-pleasing and into the purpose God placed on your life. You're finally understanding that love doesn't mean losing yourself. That compassion doesn't mean compromising your convictions. There's this toxic idea that if you love someone, you owe them unlimited access to your time, your energy, your attention. But access should never be automatic. Access is earned and it's managed with wisdom. Even Jesus had boundaries. He didn't heal every person. He didn't stay in every village. He didn't say yes to every request. There were times he walked away. Times he withdrew to be alone with the Father. Times he chose solitude over crowds. That wasn't weakness. That was wisdom. And if the Son of God had boundaries, what makes us think we don't need them too? You cannot love people well if you're constantly exhausted by them. You can't pour out if you're never poured into. You can't serve from an empty cup, and you definitely can't carry your cross if you're buried under everyone else's expectations. Boundaries create the space where your soul can breathe. They make room for restoration, reflection, and real connection with God. And from that space of strength and clarity, you can actually love people better. Because you're not loving them out of obligation or guilt, but out of freedom and choice. Let's be honest, without boundaries, resentment grows. And resentment is a slow poison. You start off saying yes to be kind, to be helpful, to be needed, but over time, those yeses turn into bitterness. You start feeling used, taken for granted. You smile on the outside, but you're fuming on the inside. You call it serving, but it's really simmering. That's not love. That's a slow death of your peace, your joy, your purpose. Boundaries prevent that. They let you say yes when you mean it and no when you need it. They keep your heart clean and your motives pure. Boundaries also teach people how to treat you. If you don't respect your time, your energy, your priorities, why would anyone else? People will treat you how you allow them to. If you're always available, always agreeable, always accessible, you're training the people around you to believe that your needs don't matter, that your time is less valuable, that your rest is optional. And once they get used to that version of you, they'll resist anything different. Not because you're wrong, but because they've gotten comfortable with your lack of boundaries. So when you finally start protecting your peace, it feels like a problem to them, but it's actually the solution to you. There's a reason God tells us to guard our hearts, because everything flows from it. Your joy, your decisions, your relationships, your future, it all flows from your heart. And guarding something means setting limits around it. Not walls of fear, but gates of wisdom. You decide what comes in and you decide what goes out. That's not being selfish, that's being a steward. That's honoring the life God has given you. And it's not just about what you say no to, it's also about what you say yes to. When you say no to constant demands, you say yes to deeper devotion. When you say no to toxic relationships, you say yes to wholeness. When you say no to pleasing people, you say yes to pleasing God. Boundaries are not built out of bitterness, they're built out of clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what you can realistically give. And that kind of clarity doesn't come from culture, it comes from communion. From spending time with God. From hearing His voice above the noise. From understanding that your worth doesn't come from how much you do for others, but from who you are in him. You are not a resource to be drained. You are a vessel to be filled. And when you're filled, you're powerful. You're intentional, you're focused. You're not tossed back and forth by every need, every opinion, and every crisis that tries to pull you off course. You're anchored. You know what God has called you to do, and you're not afraid to let go of what doesn't align with us. Because anything that constantly drains you and distracts you is a threat to your destiny. And destiny requires discipline. Discipline to say no, to say, discipline to rest, discipline to protect what God is building in you. Some of you have been praying for peace, but peace doesn't come from passivity. It comes from boundaries. You want peace in your relationships, set some boundaries. You want peace in your schedule, set some boundaries. You want peace in your mind, set some boundaries. You can't rebuke what you continue to allow. You can't pray away chaos you keep welcoming. And you can't expect peace to flourish where boundaries are constantly broken. It's time to stop feeling guilty for choosing health over hustle, for choosing clarity over chaos, for choosing obedience over obligation. It's okay to not answer every text right away. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect your time with God like it's sacred, because it is. The world will call that selfish. God calls it stewardship. And when you steward well, you don't just survive, you thrive. You grow, you bear fruit. You step into the kind of life that's not defined by burnout, but by boldness. Some people won't like your boundaries. That's okay. You weren't called to be liked by everyone. You were called to be faithful. You weren't made to meet every need. You were made to meet the right ones at the right time in the right spirit. And if you let guilt be your guide, you'll always be out of alignment. But if you let grace lead you, you'll move with purpose. Grace empowers you to love with wisdom. Grace helps you discern when to engage and when to let go. Grace reminds you that no is not a rejection, it's redirection. It's making room for what God actually has for you, not just what others expect from you. You don't need to explain your boundaries to everyone. You don't need to justify your rest. You don't need permission to protect your peace. Your worth isn't up for debate. Your purpose isn't subject to people's opinions. You're responsible for your energy, your health, your spiritual growth. That responsibility is not a burden, it's an invitation. An invitation to live freely, to live intentionally, and to live with a heart that's not worn out, but wide open to what God is doing. When you build boundaries out of love for yourself, for others, for God's calling on your life, you create a life that is sustainable, impactful, and deeply rooted, not swayed by guilt, not driven by fear, but anchored truth. And that truth is this: boundaries aren't just about keeping people out there, about keeping purpose in. Boundaries allow you to stay focused on what really matters so you don't get lost in what doesn't. They give you space to grow, space to breathe, and space to become everything God has called you to be. Stop seeking approval and start walking in authority. That shift will change your entire life. Because let's be real, too many of us are living for claps instead of calling. We're addicted to validation, to confirmation, to applause from people who didn't call us, don't know the full weight of our purpose, and can't give us the authority that only comes from God. The truth is, the more you rely on approval, the less you operate in authority. The more you need people to agree with you, like you, validate you, the less freedom you have to move when God says move. We are taught from a young age to perform for acceptance. Make people proud, make them happy. Make sure they like you, agree with you, support you. And over time, that becomes our default setting. We walk into rooms and immediately start reading the temperature instead of setting it. We shrink ourselves down to fit in. We silence our truth to avoid conflict. We edit our convictions to stay comfortable, all in the name of being liked. But liked by who? And for what? If being liked means losing your voice, it's not worth it. If it means dimming your light, it's not worth it. Because every time you trade your authenticity for approval, you're handing over your authority. Approval is a moving target. 1 minute you're praised, the next minute you're questioned. One crowd will celebrate you, another will crucify you. One moment they'll say Hosanna, and the next they'll shout, crucify him. That's not just a Bible story, that's a reality. Public opinion is unstable, and if you let it define your worth, your identity will always be at risk. That's why walking in authority matters. Authority doesn't come from applause, it comes from alignment. Alignment with God's voice, alignment with His truth, alignment with His purpose for your life. Authority isn't loud, it isn't flashy, it isn't desperate for attention. Real authority is quiet confidence. It's that unshakable knowing that says, I don't need you to validate me because God already called me. It's the peace that allows you to be misunderstood and not flinch. It's the courage to say what needs to be said, even when it's unpopular. It's the strength to take a step, even when no one's cheering. That kind of authority doesn't come from people, it comes from presence. from spending time with God, from knowing who you are in Him. The problem is you can't walk in both approval and authority. One will always cancel out the other. When you live for approval, your decisions are filtered through fear. Will they like this? Will they support this? Will they leave me if I say this? But when you walk in authority, your decisions are filtered through obedience. Did God say this? Is this aligned with His word? Is this what I'm called to do, even if it's uncomfortable? One is driven by insecurity, the other by identity. One is performance, the other is purpose. Some of you are stuck because you're waiting for permission. Permission to speak, to lead, to start, to stop, to grow. But authority doesn't wait for permission, it moves in purpose. If God said go, you don't need everyone to agree before you take the first step. If He gave you a word, you don't need every voice to affirm it. The enemy loves to use people's opinions as Alicians, because as long as you're tethered to their approval, you'll never run in your calling. You'll keep asking, is this okay? Instead of declaring, this is what I was born to do. Look at Jesus. He didn't seek the Pharisees' approval. He didn't adjust His mission based on what was popular. He wasn't afraid to disrupt systems, challenge norms, or offend those in power. He moved in authority, not popularity, and the same Spirit that raised Him from the dead now lives in you. That means you don't have to beg for a seat at the table. You can build the table. You don't have to fit into someone else's mold. You were made in the image of the Creator. You don't have to dilute your calling just to be digestible to people who were never assigned to your destiny. Authority means you understand your assignment. It means you don't get distracted by every voice, every opinion, every reaction. You're not arrogant, but you're also not apologetic. You don't water down your message just to keep people comfortable. You don't compromise your values just to avoid being criticized. You don't keep waiting for the right moment. You realize the right moment is when God says it's time. Authority walks different. It talks different. It carries weight not because of titles or approval, but because of who you walk with. Seeking approval will wear you out. It's a full-time job trying to keep everyone happy. You'll find yourself in this constant loop of overthinking, over-explaining, over-performing, trying to earn a validation that was never yours to chase in the first place. And the tragedy is you'll end up surrounded by people who love your mask but have no idea who you really are. That's not connection, that's confinement. That's living in a prison made of other people's preferences. But authority sets you free. Because when you know who you are in Christ, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop begging to be chosen. You stop second guessing your instincts. You stop explaining every decision. You stop apologizing for being bold, for being different, for being obedient. You start showing up fully. You start speaking truth without trembling. You start walking into rooms like you belong there because you do. Not because people let you in, but because God sent you in. Some of the most powerful moments in your life won't be the ones where everyone cheers. They'll be the ones where you stood alone, stood firm, and stood faithful, where you chose truth over trend, where you chose purpose over popularity, where you chose authority over approval. Those are the moments that shape your legacy, because the world doesn't need more agreeable people, it needs more anointed ones. People who are willing to lead with courage, love with strength, speak with clarity, and move with conviction. You weren't made to blend in. You were made to break ground, to shift atmospheres, to shake systems, to carry a message that changes lives. But you'll never do that if you're constantly editing yourself to fit in. You've got to choose approval or authority, because one will keep you liked, the other will keep you aligned. And alignment will take you places applause never could. There's a boldness that comes when you realize you've been authorized by God. Not man, not titles, not followers, but God. And when you really grasp that, you stop chasing seats at tables where your value is up for debate. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who can't even see the real you. You stop waiting for an invitation and start walking like you've already been sent, because you have. You've been sent into this world with a divine assignment, and your obedience is more important than their opinions. Don't let the fear of being misunderstood keep you from being obedient. Don't let the fear of losing people keep you from finding your voice. Don't let the fear of criticism stop you from stepping into what God called you to do. Criticism is confirmation that you're moving, that you're not sitting on your gift, that you're not playing it safe. If you're not being criticized, chances are you're not being courageous. Authority invites resistance, but it also brings results, real results, eternal results, fruit that lasts. You don't need to be the most liked person in the room. You need to be the most anchored in truth, anchored in purpose, anchored in the word. And when you're anchored like that, storms won't move you. Opinions won't shake you. Silence won't scare you, because your identity isn't up for negotiation. It's rooted in the one who gave it to you. So walk like you're chosen, speak like you're sent, lead like you're called, Not because of who claps, but because of who crowned you. You don't have to hustle for a position that God already reserved for you. You don't have to prove you're enough when you've already been equipped. Stop letting temporary opinions rob you of eternal authority. Stop shrinking to fit into spaces you were meant to transform. The world is loud. The pressure is real. The temptation to be accepted is constant. But so is the call. The call to rise, to lead, to be different, to walk in the bold, unshakable authority of someone who knows whose they are. You were made for more than applause. You were made to walk in purpose, on purpose with power. Approval will keep you safe, but authority will set you free.